Good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us. Happy to have alongside today Franklin County Sheriff John Grismore. Sheriff, it's been a while.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Richard. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a while. It's nice to be back with you again.
Thanks. Good to have you back. Boy, just reading, just hearing all the time about understaffing for it just seems like most police, sheriff's departments. How are you doing staffing-wise these days?
Yeah, staffing-wise, we're doing very well.
Really?
We benefit from having our school resource officers available to us during the summer, so that adds some additional resources. But we're doing well. Yeah. We can faithfully complete our contractual obligations right now, so that feels good. That hasn't been a position that we've been in for a very long time. You know, staffing is a challenge. It's a very big challenge.
Sounds like it.
We've lost 3 of our full-time level 3 people in the last couple of years. 3 are our most senior people. Wow. 2 took jobs that are outside of law enforcement, and 1 took a job that is in law enforcement but not in the patrol capacity. So it's a struggle. You know, we're seeing the attrition rates are really high, and they're high amongst the senior-most personnel, which is really scary, is really scary.
How many full-time deputies do you have?
So we have a combination. Well, we have courts as well. So you know, it's not just the patrol division. So with courts and with that, we're still around 19.
Really?
Yeah, we're around 19, and we have 4 or 5 part-time folks that support us as well.
Yeah. I know some controversy for you guys out of Enosburg Falls fairly recently, and again, just reading a story or two, they seem to be unhappy that they weren't getting the service that they were contracted for. Your reaction, and I've even read, I guess, that they were thinking of forming their own police department. I'm saying, boy, good luck. Have you got a handle on the numbers of doing that? But what your reaction to that?
Yeah, so this all started back in the previous administration. You know, with challenges with staffing. Yeah. Certain contracts were getting neglected, and Enosburg was one of them. Richford another, Sheldon another. And this was back when the St. Albans town contract was in full swing. Yeah. And that was 2 people in the town, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's the considerable resources for the St. Albans for the St. Albans
You've been
town.
out of the town now just about exactly one year.
Yep. So when I took office, one of the priorities that I had was to level the playing field a little bit better, to spread those resources out a little more uniformly. So what that meant was scaling back what we had committed to St. Albans town. And this was a negotiation process. This isn't something that I just did. I had lots of conversations with the leadership in the St. Albans town. They were amicable to this. They supported that.
And in fact, they got some money back, right?
They got some money back.
Saved some money out of that.
Correct. Yep. So we went to 2 shifts a day instead of 3 shifts a day with them. So what that did is it allowed me to then add some resources to towns that weren't getting much. Enosburg being one, Sheldon being another, and Richford being another. They weren't getting the full amount that they had contracted for, but they were at least getting some. So one of the things that I had done in Enosburg, as I did in all of the other towns, was to get out in front of them immediately and explain to them what we were seeing for challenges, what the staffing challenges were like, and how I was planning on spreading the resources more uniformly again around those partners that we've had, that the sheriff's office has had long-standing agreements with. So that was a priority for me. So I did that. And there was multiple, as it relates to Enosburg, there were multiple conversations about this.
And again, this is a town of Enosburg or the village of Enosburg?
They're combined.
Falls?
They're combined. Yep. The Enosburg, the village contributes money into the equation, and the town manages it.
But both the village and town?
Yep, both of them are on the same contract. Okay. So as we approached the negotiation period, so May of that year, 2 years ago, we were having lots of conversations about staffing, and I was very upfront. And one of the things that I did or attempted to do with some towns bought it, some towns didn't, but I wanted to rewrite the contracts to be more realistic. And what that meant was that we would now incorporate language that was a target number of hours, not a direct commitment, because that wasn't feasible. It wasn't possible for us to do. St. Albans town accepted that language. Some other towns accepted it. Enosburg didn't want to. They didn't want to accept that language, which was fine. They certainly, it's their prerogative.
So they basically said, no, we want all the service that we contracted for.
Correct. Now, and keep in mind too, we were only billing for the services that were rendered. That was another piece of that contract language that I wanted to change, so that it wasn't this bill in advance. The long-standing process had been towns were billed a month in advance.
Huh.
So then at the end of like the previous administration, the end of that administration, there were years where tens of thousands of dollars had to be paid back to these towns.
Really?
So this isn't a new thing. It certainly didn't start with me. So this has been a challenge for many, many years. So it was important to me to at least get some hours back in and to reestablish our presence in these communities, at least a little bit. Granted, it wasn't the full contractual amount, but I was very transparent about that. And there's lots of emails that I've saved that demonstrate that. You know, it was important for me to be very open, very honest with these towns.
Yeah.
So that's what happened with Enosburg. So as we were going through the negotiation process, the negotiations just failed. You know, they had two demands that the office wasn't willing to meet. Demand number one was that I reduce the price. I can't, you know what I mean? I can't give away our services. It's incredibly expensive for law enforcement, you know, services.
Yeah.
It just is. Healthcare, everybody feels the pinch from rising healthcare costs. Insurance
and
costs.
I can only assume those costs are going up somewhat.
They've gone up dramatically for everybody. It's not just in the law enforcement sector. Everybody's feeling the pinch from
education.
Yeah, the pinch for healthcare. Yeah. Insurance costs are going up. Yeah. The other big challenge that we have is that when the talent pool is very depleted, now you have other agencies that are competing for those very scarce resources. Yeah. So a lot of entities were starting to roll out bonuses. Big bonuses, $10,000, $15,000 sign-on bonuses.
To get some more people.
Correct. So people were jumping ship to go to these other organizations that would offer that. And we couldn't compete with that. We're locked into contracts. You know, I don't have a municipal board to go back to and say, hey, can we take money from the highway department to supplement the police department? I don't have that luxury. Yeah. So we're locked into those. We're locked into those commitments. So when Enosburg, the negotiations, which I thought were going well, they at one point had asked me to consider providing 7 days a week rather than the 5 traditional days. And it's all out there. I mean, all those things are taped, right? Yeah. So it's all out there for folks to go back and look at.
So things weren't resolved. So are you patrolling Enosburg at all now?
We're not. So in the negotiations, like with any contractual negotiations, sometimes you just don't reach you don't see eye to eye, and you move on. And that's what happened. They wanted two things again that I wasn't willing to provide. The cost being one, everybody gets the same price. I don't change the cost for one town versus another.
Everybody's
the same cost. It's all the same per hour cost. Yeah. The other thing they wanted was to have our cruiser GPS data. And that's not something I'm willing to provide. There's personal information on there. Our folks, bring their cruisers home, and that's not information that I was confident that they could secure, nor was it necessary. I was certainly willing to use that data if there were some concerns about were our cruisers in town, were they not, those kinds of things. But they didn't accept that as an alternative, so they just fizzled out. And so that was fine. That's how it worked. And then very recently there was an article that was just really mischaracterizing what had happened and saying that it was, basically pointing the finger at me, like I was unwilling to do this kind of stuff. No, that's not what happened. So I did a letter to the editor because I wanted to make it very clear of what really happened, because the residents of Enosburg, a village and town, they deserve to have the truth. They weren't getting it. Yeah. So I felt compelled to make sure that picture was a lot more illustrative than what was being painted for them.
So bottom line, so they have no contract with you now?
No contract. Nothing. That's correct.
Again, I guess some talk about starting their own department. Boy, good luck with that. But
yeah, good luck with that. That's a huge endeavor. And I think that for folks that aren't in law enforcement, that don't understand really what that takes, it seems like a plausible idea, but in reality it's not. And it's unbelievably expensive. The dollar amount that they were floating out were ridiculously low. Again, when you think of insurances, healthcare, compensation, cruisers, training, right? There's so many pieces to it that it just didn't make sense.
So if they have second thoughts and come back to you, you would talk to them again?
Of course I would. I absolutely would. And we're starting to look at maybe looking at the village. If the town doesn't want our services, then, and when I say that, Richard, too, keep in mind, this is the select board making the decisions. This isn't a general consensus from the population of Enosburg. So for me, it's really what's the greater good? Is it going to be important enough for the members of the select board to swallow some pride and renegotiate and come back to the table and have a conversation? If so, great. I'm more than happy to have a conversation and resume negotiations on what services could be. Enosburg needs our help.
Yeah.
They just do, and they know that they do. So again, it's when we say Enosburg, it's really the select board making the decision. Hopefully an educated decision based on what the will of the townspeople and the village folks really want for their spend, what they want to do with the money that they've allocated.
Yeah.
So, but we're very willing to renegotiate and go back to the table. And for me, it's not about ego. It's not about pride. My role is to provide the best services I can to Franklin County, and I'm committed to do that despite any of this rhetoric that goes back and forth.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you are back in Georgia. You have a contract with Georgia.
We
now.
are. Yep.
And of course, they had flipped over to Milton PD for a while.
They did. Yep. And actually, they signed on for a few hours. They wanted to kind of feel us
Are
out.
they doing Milton too?
No,
or
just
you guys?
us. Yep. So, and of course the state police. So they wanted to kind of feel us out, right? I mean, everybody knows that the relationship with the previous administration and the town of Georgia dissolved in an abrupt and unfavorable fashion.
Yeah.
But with me getting back in, it's felt better, I think, for the town. And certainly for us, and it's a great town. We love it. It's a great town to patrol. So
How many hours in Georgia
So
for you?
right now we're doing 8. Originally we were doing 8. They ramped that up to 20.
Oh,
They
yeah.
saw the value immediately and bumped it up
Yeah.
to 20. So right now I had a very good meeting, a very successful meeting with them a week or so ago, and they're considering. I'm hoping, would expect that they're considering at least continuing what we're doing and maybe potentially adding some hours. So that's going very, very well. Yeah, we're happy to be back in Georgia.
And you're back in Highgate now after what, City PD at Highgate for
Correct.
a couple
Yep.
years?
Yep, another great partnership. Really enjoy the leadership in Highgate, and they're very
I guess they
responsive.
have a
They're
new,
very
I just heard
engaged.
today, I guess they have a new town administrator. Haven't met that person. I guess they just hired a new town administrator.
Yep. I knew that they were in the process of doing that. But again, a really engaged board, an engaged community. We have a really good relationship with them, and we're very happy to be there. Sheldon's another one.
So Sheldon, I was going to say, what other towns have you got contract with Sheldon?
Sheldon's another one. They had some other reservations or some similar reservations that other towns did,
Yeah.
with us not, that the sheriff's office not being able to provide those services.
Yeah.
They had looked at some other opportunities and ended up coming back to the table, and we had some good conversations about those services.
When you say look at other opportunities, what else is out there? I mean,
Well,
towns can't even contract with state police now, can they, or can they?
Well, I can't speak on what the state can and can't do.
I'm
I'm not aware of them.
just aware they're
I'm not
so
aware of them doing
understaffed,
that.
but-
Yep, exactly. Yep, I'm not aware of them taking on any
I know that
individual
came up in
contracts,
Swanton a couple of elections ago in Swanton Town, when the town police budget was going up to hook into Swanton Village PD.
Yeah, right.
When they were, paying the officers more and stuff. And
Yeah.
one of the candidates said, it's too much. I'm going to oppose the big increase in the
Right.
police budget.
Yep.
And I said, and if that goes down, state police will cover us. And I'm saying,
Right.
boy, good luck with that.
Yeah, and they have the state police, a great group. We have a great relationship
Yeah.
with them, and we really we work very, very well together. But they're understaffed as well, right? I mean, they're pulled in a lot of directions, and they also have Grand Isle. Right, so
Right.
they don't just have Franklin County; they also have Grand Isle, at least out of our St. Albans barracks. So, but Sheldon was another one. Sheldon, we got back around the table and had a good conversation, and we've just signed another year contract starting in July 1, and this is going to be more hours than the previous one. So, we've shown our value there. They've seen that. We enjoy being in Sheldon. It's another great town for us to patrol. They've got some residents that are very engaged with us, and that's great. We love to hear from the members of the public. That helps us shape our patrol. And that's one of the great things about the sheriff's office is that we really can work with the leadership in the towns based on information from the community and customize our services. That's a great thing about what we can provide.
Yeah. Have you got other contracts too, while we're talking contracts with Franklin County towns?
So Fairfax.
Fairfax?
Yep. So we have a long-standing relationship with Fairfax. So we're still engaged with them.
Could you pick up more? Have you got enough staffing to pick up more contracts if you wanted to? Or?
Certainly, right now, as of
right now.
this moment, we can because again, we have our school resource officers. But we certainly could in 4 months.
Yeah.
If we had enough time to really position ourselves for that, I'm confident that we could accept some additional business. It
Well,
just takes a
seems
while
like-
to ramp up. That's the challenge. We don't have folks that are just sitting around waiting for work. So it's just marrying the need against the resources that we have.
Yeah, it just seems like these towns, seems like there are not a lot of alternatives out there.
There really aren't. Nope, there really aren't.
Sheriff, going back, boy, I guess it's about 3 years right around now, the incident at headquarters with a combative detainee that maybe everybody about 3 years ago.
Yep.
Boy, I'm sure that's on your mind, but
No, it's actually not, Richard.
Oh, is that right?
It's
I
no.
was thinking every day, boy, you gotten past that.
Yeah, I have. It's you're innocent until proven guilty. I wasn't proven guilty. I'm innocent. I'm exonerated.
And of course,
it's been
too,
expunged.
Yeah.
It's in the past. In terms of the law, it doesn't exist anymore. So no, we're moving forward. It's something that I don't think about. I have no time to think about all of that.
I don't mean to torture you.
No, it's okay.
But again, simple assault charge came out of that, of course. Doug DeSabato, the Grand Isle County prosecutor, tried you twice, and I guess he said he would have even tried you a third time had you not been decertified.
Nah, I doubt that, Richard. I doubt that.
I've never dealt with a third. Anyway,
he was getting lots of pressure to just be done with it.
But anyway, a couple of mistrials, hung juries.
Yep.
Do you know out of curiosity, what the jury breakdown was in either case?
I don't. I don't, and it's really a hard thing to read. It's you look at faces, you kind of watch body language throughout the process, and it's really hard to get a read on what it was. But given that it was so public. That everybody had an opportunity to come up with ideas. I mean, the jury selection process was unbelievably exhausting.
Right?
Yep, it was unreal how many people had an opinion, either for or against.
I mean, everybody
based on what they saw.
Everybody must have known something about it. Did they?
Everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah, maybe one out of the several hundred jurors through both trials that or maybe pretended that they didn't hear about it. But it was that piece was very frustrating because how could you ever get a fair trial when the video was leaked? We've identified that it was purposely leaked. The previous administration purposely leaked it. There was a lot of political maneuvering for that too. So, but when those things kind of happen, how can anybody, how can justice be fair, when that happens? But
anyway, so obviously not the resolution you wanted, but obviously you'll take a hung jury over a conviction. But obviously we're hoping for an acquittal. I can certainly relate that I know at least one former prosecutor who would not have brought that charge, and actually I think I know a current prosecutor. Yeah. But anyway, what happened?
And I've heard that a lot. I've heard that a lot, and so it certainly has this sting of political motivated issue, but
well, I guess
that's
the thing
okay.
that obviously affected you to some extent was the decertification.
Yep.
And boy, that's a final. There's no appeal.
We did appeal.
You did appeal.
We did appeal, but it was upheld. So
that's a dead issue.
It's dead.
There's no way you can get that certification back.
Richard, I don't want it back.
You don't want it back?
I'm going to tell you something.
Nope.
A good friend of mine that I worked with for lots and lots of years said something to me a while back that really resonated. And he said, nothing takes the weight off your shoulders like the badge off your chest.
Interesting.
Yep. So not having that additional responsibility. And I was going through some old cases the other day and realizing how many call outs that I had, how many times I was called out at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning to go deal with things. I don't have that obligation anymore.
Nothing you don't have to worry about now.
No, I don't have to go respond.
If there's an incident in the middle of the night, you'd still get a call about it?
Probably would get a call about it. Yep.
You wouldn't be responding, obviously.
Wouldn't be responding. Yep. I'm not putting myself in harm's way anymore. I'm not overextending myself like I was before.
Interesting.
I in the previous role.
So some good out of that, it sounds like you're saying in a way, I guess, huh?
It's Huge relief.
Oh, really?
Yep. And it's kind of funny. I think there was a lot of.
The job is it's mostly administrative. I guess it is what you makes it, but it's largely administrative anyway.
Correct. Every chief, sheriff, every person in that role, 99% of their job is administrative. It just is. It's a fallacy for anybody to get up in front of the camera and say that it's not. I don't know any sheriff that's out there, patrolling out a majority of their function or, doesn't have a huge administrative component to what they do. So, the legislature tried to make my life more difficult by taking that away. In reality, it's made it a heck of a lot better.
Boy, I assume you weren't thinking about that at the time.
I wasn't. It's one of those silver lining things that it's just given me tremendous flexibility and really focusing on what I need to focus. Because before, Richard, I was the person responsible for all the finances.
Wow.
I was in charge of the entire patrol division, all the uniformed personnel. Plus, I pulled shifts, right? So when something, a shift went vacant, it was on me to go fill. So then now I was a patrol deputy. So I had those 3 hats that I was wearing all the time. It was exhausting, emotionally, mentally, physically, just draining. And it really took something catastrophic to get me out of this, right?
That's interesting.
It really was a blessing. It was a blessing to have this happen. Of course, it would have been nice to have it happen a different way.
Sure.
But that's the reality of it. And I've just embraced this new, quote unquote, new role that I'm in, and I've had a lot of fun in it. And I'm able to focus on process improvements. We're looking at 2 projects right now that are going to increase our efficiencies and save us a ton of money.
Really?
So those are the things that I love to do. And looking at better technology and ways that our folks can just be better at the jobs that they do and be out in the field more often and minimize waste, time waste, things like that. Looking at this intelligent-based policing ideal of really leveraging information at hand to maximize where we're at, when we're there, so that we can have the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak. So those are all things that I'm really excited about that we're looking at. And again, huge savings, tens of thousands of dollars a year. And that's great, when people think that, law enforcement services are expensive. Yep, they are. But one of the priorities that we have now that I'm able to look at, to work on, is identifying these opportunities to save a lot of money, but also increase. It's not a negative. It's also increasing our capabilities and saving money at the same time. So.
A year from now, we'll certainly be talking a lot of politics, 2026, a political year. That kind of begs the question. I realize it's a year or so ahead of time.
Yep.
Are you thinking at this point about running for re-election?
I haven't decided. Haven't gotten that far.
You're open to that?
I am open to that. Yep, we'll see. It still feels like a really long ways away.
Yeah.
There's lots and lots of things to accomplish between now and then, and better places to focus my energy and my efforts on than thinking about a re-election. But there'll be plenty of time for that in the in the next year or so.
But you're open to that. That's a possibility.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Boy, I guess some of the biggest law enforcement news around here, John, has been just the immigration enforcement activity, including, again, we're taping this show on Tuesday, June 17, and just this past weekend in Richford, two people detained. And anyway, any thoughts? Do you have any? I'm sure you have a relationship, but with the ICE folks and stuff, are you ever called in with any of their activities, or any thoughts on? And again, Pleasant Valley Farm, the big farm in Berkshire, of course, I guess 9 people taken away. Any thoughts on all that? Certainly a huge news story.
It is huge news. Yep. And we're seeing some of the
protests at the State House yesterday.
Yep, some of the fallout nationwide from some of those activities.
And the president seems to be going back and forth. I guess at one point he said, well, we're going to not go after agriculture and hospitality workers, but I'm hearing mixed things about that. But
it's hard to keep track of exactly what's coming out of Washington. But as far as we're concerned, we're making it very clear we're not the immigration police.
Yeah.
We don't interact with ICE often at all. Border Patrol is, we interact with them a lot. They're a great resource for us.
Yeah.
They back us up. They back up the state police a lot. Other entities they provide law enforcement support for. So, but we don't really get involved in the immigration side of things. And the state of Vermont's made it very clear as to what law enforcement officers, certified law enforcement officers in Vermont can and can't do with regards to immigration enforcement. So that's been very, very clearly spelled out. So we know our boundaries. We know where we can interact and where we can't. So that's been very well defined for us.
Yeah. Again, you've been sheriff for a while now. Types of crime, does that change? I mean, you're always hearing about drug-related crimes. Anything kind of jumping out at you as you think about just the type of crimes you folks are dealing with?
It's all
Sheriff?
the same. Yep, it's all the same. I mean, drugs are still a big problem. Speeding is a big issue for us. I mean, that's the number one issue that we deal with right now.
And speeding, that's what I hear about.
Yeah, it's a big thing for us. Traffic stops is by far the highest incident that's reported or that's categorized. So we're addressing that, and it's also related to us being reestablished in some of these towns. We haven't been in Sheldon, so we're now in Sheldon, and
so
people are realizing
in Sheldon in a while.
It's busy. Yep, it's been busy. Same thing with Georgia. Once we get established and the citizens understand that we're going to be around a lot more often, the behaviors trend downward, those negative behaviors trend downward, and so we see less speeding and less things like that. But initially on, that's kind of what we see. But it's countywide. Everybody feels the same kind of a pinch. Drugs are a big issue. Theft still can be an issue depending upon which community. Assaults are still are still an issue. Not a big issue. Thankfully, one of the great things about Franklin County is the number of incidences, particularly in the areas that I'm responsible for, are very, very low. But again, speeding and we are seeing drugs. There's lots of drug use, drug activity, lots of needles being dumped, things like that. That's unfortunate, but we're doing our best to address it. And that's where the community can come in. We had a great case out of Georgia where a community member took some pictures, and the next day we made an arrest on somebody that was dumping needles.
Is that right? Just dumping needles.
Exactly. Yep. And so we can get after that, and that's where again having community members that want to take a stand, and they don't have to, stand up in front of the jury, but pictures, descriptive information, dates, times, those kinds of things, like in this case, were huge, and they can be very, very helpful for us as we try to resolve some of these issues.
Yeah. Your cruisers, are you in decent shape with your cruisers, or? We
are. Yep. Our fleet's still pretty new.
How many cruisers are we talking?
We have. That's a great question. There's 14, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we have 14 of them.
Wow.
Yep, and some that we kind of slate for traffic only. We do a lot of traffic control. So some of the older ones will rotate out of the patrol group and make those kind of traffic vehicles. But we've got we've got a really nice fleet. It's updated
and typically with road work and stuff, you folks you'll get signed up to help out with road work and traffic control, obviously.
We will. Yep, when we can
like
spare the people. Yep, there is. Yep, there is. And the summertime's a busy time for us, and those are good. Those are good contracts for us to be involved with as well.
And court, obviously, just court functions are a big part of what you're doing also.
They are. Matter of fact, we're looking, and we've been working with the courts pretty closely about expanding some, or potentially expanding some services there to add some resources.
And
it's busy. Courts are busy.
So what would you expand? What would the expand?
Just adding more folks.
Really?
I mean, more in the the security roles in the court. That's a big thing. Transporting folks from corrections to court for hearings and back again is another big, a big thing. Chittenden County Sheriff's Office helps us out a lot with that. They've got some additional resources that they've been great in helping us.
Speaking of Chittenden County, if they arrest, a male down there, that male who's being arrested and held would typically be brought up to Northwest State?
It could be, yeah. I don't know a lot of those inner workings of the Department of Corrections, but yeah, there's people that are kind of spread out throughout the state. Just because they commit a crime in a particular community doesn't mean that they would be housed in the most regional, the most local facility, but we'll have folks from Southern State that need to come up for hearings, and so that's a big piece. But back to the courts, where hopefully we can add some resources there, and they need it. They're real busy.
Yeah. Again, you've been deputy sheriff, now the sheriff for a number of years. Have things changed much with the sheriff's department? There are, I guess, always some changes, but is it a very different situation now than when you started as a deputy?
No, it really isn't.
Not really.
No. We've still got a great group of folks. I'm really blessed to have the people that we have. We've got a lot of experience on the team. We have some newer folks that bring a new life, a new motivation to the job, and no, I'm lucky. I'm really lucky. I've got a great team. I've got folks that run the administrative side of the house very efficiently, that take a lot of the worry off my off my mind. And again, just having competent, supported folks makes my life just very, very easy, and allows me to focus on improvements that I have been. So but I don't think so. People are people. Managing people, still managing people. It's the same as it always has been, same as it always will be. And fortunately for me, I've got a great group, so that piece is real easy. Yeah,
for law enforcement, just with some of the highly publicized incidents that have happened, boy, you don't hear about a lot of young people wanting to get into law enforcement. Do you think the feelings about law enforcement, I suspect a lot better around here than some places, but do you see that getting any better in hopes that, law enforcement can be a good career? Think about it.
Well, in other states it is. I'll use Florida as an example. Law enforcement's unbelievably well supported.
Oh, is that right? In Florida,
it's well supported.
Example?
From the governor down. The legislative body is very supportive of law enforcement down there. It's not here in Vermont. That's the truth, Richard. It's that, every day it seems like something's coming out of Montpelier that's making our jobs more difficult, more challenging. And people don't want to come to the state of Vermont and be law enforcement. That's what we see. That's the truth. That's the cold hard truth, that it's going to require a cultural shift. When the leadership in this state wants to prioritize law enforcement, support law enforcement. And there's a great video that was going around from a sheriff down in Florida that got a lot of attention about this, the riots that were happening down there.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said that really resonated with me, but he says this: if you spit at us, you're going to the hospital, then you're going to jail.
Yeah.
Now, whether you agree with that or don't agree with that, boy, it really sends a message that spitting on a law enforcement officer is a big deal in the state of Florida. It's obviously not here in Vermont,
I guess you can relate to that.
as I can attest to. So
We gotta wrap it up. Sheriff John Grismore, thanks a lot for the time, Sheriff. Good to see you.
great. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks to producer Alan Cunningham. Thanks for watching us here on Northwest Access TV. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. See you next time.